Hey everyone, welcome to the 5th season of Travel Tales, a podcast by Afar. I'm Aislyn, and yes, I host the show. Each week on the podcast, we hear stories of life-changing travel from poets, writers, entrepreneurs, authors, and so many more. And this season, we'll be sharing short Q&As inspired by each episode that you can only find here. This is Travel Tales. Tim, welcome to Travel Tales.
Thanks for having me.
I can't wait for listeners to hear your story. And in this story, you talk about a trip to Argentina to explore the topic of rewilding. Right. How did this trip come about?
I was sent an email by a company called Journeys with Purpose. It's a tour operator that offers trips around different places in the world with conservation leaders. So you get to see right on the ground what's happening with these various conservation projects. They had trips coming up in Romania with a rewilding expert called Isabella Tree, an excursion to Belize, and then this trip to Argentina, which really caught my eye.
Yeah, why is that? Like, what about it was intriguing to you?
Well, I've never been, at the time I'd never been to South America at all, which is quite a big gap for a travel editor, entire continent. But the work there is done by a company called Rewilding Argentina, which is an offshoot of Tompkins Conservation. That's the company that was set up by the late Doug Tompkins and Chris Tompkins. Yes. He was from North Face and she was from Patagonia, and they've done loads of good work over several decades, initially in Chile and then Argentina. And I've been following their story for a while, and we've spoken to Chris at Afar a few times. And I'm just really keen to see what it looks like on the ground.
For people who aren't familiar, can you kind of briefly describe rewilding? What is it and why is it so valuable, especially in a place like South America?
Yeah, totally. I mean, initially I thought it, just meant leaving nature to do its thing, like let things go wild again. But there's actually much more hands-on than that. It's about removing invasive species, reintroducing keystone species, and managing the land, and obviously trying to avoid things like logging and fishing and overfishing. And the key thing that Rewilding Argentina are doing is they're trying to bring tourism into that. So bring travelers in through basic campsites, which are free, and more high-end glamping sites, and let people come and see these places and understand the beauty of them and the need to protect them, and then have that tourism money kind of somewhat supplant the money from more extractive economies and more degrading sort of approaches to the land.
What did you do? Where did you go? And what did you do?
Yeah, I had a really hectic trip. Flew into Buenos Aires and then flew straight down to an area that they call Patagonia Azul. It's on the coastline, a few hours south of Buenos Aires. And then I spent a few days with conservationists there looking at the projects they're doing along the coast. Then went back to Buenos Aires and then went back all the way up to El Impenetrable National Park, which is in the north, right close to the northern border, in the Gran Chaco forest, which is the second largest forest in South America. So two very different landscapes and two very different, areas, but very similar approach in terms of what they're doing.
And it sounds like in terms of tourism, like most things are pretty rustic at this point. Did you camp most of the time? Were you staying in lodges? Or?
Yeah, they're setting up some. El Impenetrable is a little bit more established. They have a couple of glamping sites there, which are these tents that have beds and showers and all the amenities you'd expect, and really good restaurants. But very small, just half a dozen tents. And then they also have these campsites, which are basically wooden platforms in the trees that you can pitch your own tent on. We also took a boat trip down a river there and camped in a tent on the side of the river, which was great, with caiman sort of alligator type creatures around and no one else. Very, very deserted, very hardly any tourism at all. You sign the guest book, and all the names that have been signed are Argentinian people generally, and kind of first explorers. This place has been going for a couple of years. And then in Azul at the coast, they were building the campsite. It was just lots of wood piled up with tarpaulin over it, and they were starting to build it. And I toured a couple of the campsites there, but I actually had to stay in the lodgings of the conservationists because the glamping wasn't open yet, and there is a hotel but some distance away. So it's all very nascent, and the only people I saw were a couple of German tourists, a couple of other European tourists, and a few fishermen. Wow. Yeah, it was brilliant.
How incredible to kind of be on the ground floor of tourism in these places.
And that's rare for me. I don't know about you, but I've never been anywhere like that. It's so kind of
I
nascent.
don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially because Argentina, people travel there a lot. It's not like an unknown destination, but to think that there's these places that people don't typically go was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, what were some of the highlights for you?
Seeing some of the creatures, the animals that call this place home, getting up close with some tapirs, which you'll hear about at the start of the episode, taking a kayak through deep mud and seeing them up close.
What's a tapir again?
It's sort of like a pig-like creature with a long snout. It was drinking water at the edge of a lagoon when we were there. And being surrounded by thousands of penguins was the first for me. I've seen a handful in wildlife parks, but the noise they make was really striking. You'll hear that on the podcast. And just walking up to this deserted lighthouse and seeing penguins huddling under bushes right next to the path, and you can't get too close to them, but they're just all around you, and that was pretty cool. And Ibera, the giant river otter who I met in El Impenetrable National Park, watching her being released and dive into a bucket of water to grab a live fish and eviscerate that was pretty interesting. So yeah, lots of the animal encounters.
Well, I know that you were really eager to see an anteater. Did you ever actually see one?
Only on video, and it was great. I just love how they look. But it was a sad video. It was an anteater kind of taunting a jaguar and coming back and forwards, and then the video had been edited, and then the last scene was just the anteater being carried off in the jaguar's mouth. So it was like, seeing that food chain in nature sort of spectrum. I did see a lot of footage on camera traps because there's a lot of that happening, a lot of monitoring of animals as well.
And the jaguar is one of the species that they're helping to reintroduce, right? Like that's part of their programming.
Correct. Yeah, they have one captive female who can't be released. I believe it was a problem with her leg, but then there's at the time there was a wild male who was coming for visits, and they'd orchestrate it so they could get into the pen together and breed, and they've since released more, and there's more been spotted, so their numbers are growing. But at the time there were very few. There still are very few, and it was magical to be up close with one of them.
Well, these are places like we were talking about in Argentina that travelers don't typically go. Why would you argue that someone should go, instead of, or maybe in addition to, the more typical Patagonian places or Buenos Aires?
Well, the two spots I went to are easy to reach. They're internal flights, so a couple of hours. Great airlines, very reliable. The taxis tend to deliver you just before the plane leaves, so you just go straight through the airport and you're off. I really liked Patagonia, Azul, the coastal area. It's just beautiful. It's where the steppe meets the Argentine Sea, and you've got these tufts of grass everywhere and wide vistas and rocky outcrops and big bays. And we took a boat trip to an island where this lighthouse was, and there's no other boats around, no other people or infrastructure. It's mostly large sheep ranches, and just that sense of space and beauty and just no other people has really appealed to me. Yeah. And in El Impenetrable, it's really, the name kind of sums it up. It's very impenetrable. It's like the trees close in on you and the roads get more rugged and bumpy and dusty as you get closer to it. So it's quite an intrepid sort of trip to go there. But once you're there, if you stay with the glamping site and go with someone like Journeys with Purpose, you're well looked after, and there's great bird watching, just chance to sort of unwind and be in nature, and again just on your own, really, almost.
And does Journeys with Purpose offer this trip semi-regularly? Is that
they have one to Argentina. I think it's to another park, but they also offer custom trips, and potentially you could do this on your own. You could look at the camping or glamping, the Rewilding Argentina, and sort your own flights and transport out.
Cool.
You could do it that way. One thing that I didn't get into in the podcast that I really liked was the food as well. I had lots of good food throughout the trip.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me more.
So there's, again, with Journeys with Purpose, it's all about supporting local businesses. So we had great empanadas at a family-run restaurant outside the park. The glamp sites themselves have full kitchens and chefs. And, I had great gnocchi and poached pear one night. I went to a restaurant called Ana Restaurante de Campo, which is near El Impenetrable, set in its own fields full of vegetables and other produce. And we had all kinds of local ingredients: yucca bread with gazpacho soup, smoked fish croquettes with a green pumpkin puree, a lemongrass dessert, all kinds of really nice dishes. And then the asado, when they cook the barbecue, they barbecue the meat adjacent to the fire instead of on top of it. All sorts of the mate tea that you drink constantly while you're on the road and share the kind of
keeps you
going. Exactly. And then Buenos Aires obviously has loads of options. So yeah, it's a real foodie trip as well, which is an unexpected bonus.
Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that because usually, you know, I think of like camping or, I mean, maybe glamping is a little higher end, but as being like a, you know, hot dog and
no hot
some
dogs.
kind of like dried food. Yeah.
Did not have a single hot dog.
You've been back for a while. Has it changed anything for you in terms of how you see conservation or travel?
Yeah, I mean, travel-wise, it makes me want to go back to Argentina, definitely. Spend more time there. Yeah. Such a big country and so much opportunity. But yeah, really, what I like most was seeing all this up close. So you can read the statistics and you can hear about the amount of carbon sequestered and think of things from a distant point of view when it comes to this. But to actually be on the ground and see it up close, meet the people who are doing it, really get caught up in their enthusiasm for it and hear about the challenges they have and meet the local people who have started opening up their homes and working on crafts or food and meeting travelers and just... It was really positive experience seeing tourism grown from the ground up in a thoughtful, slow, measured way. And they're not chucking in big hotels there. You know, there's a limit to how many people they want to bring in. Yeah. So that was really inspiring for me.
I love that. And it's so, you know, we hear so much negative news, right? Especially around kind of climate change and the issues. So it's cool to actually be able to have in-person experiences that sound so positive.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even just now looking at my phone, the record heat in China and various other the oceans turning different colour, all this kind of doom and gloom that you just pick up, it just feeds into your brain constantly. And then just to remember that there are all these people in all these places around the world doing these good things and making a difference one day at a time. Yeah. If you're having climate anxiety or you know you want to see this kind of stuff, I would definitely recommend actually going to it and meeting the people. And Journeys with Purpose is a great way to do it. And Rewilding Argentina are doing great things. Very
cool. Well, thank you, Tim. Thanks for sharing your time and your thoughts.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
See you next season. Okay, that was our show. I'll include a link to the full episode below, and please don't forget to hit like and subscribe on your way out.